Quote, "But before anything else, who are you? You who hold this book between your hands and are beginning to read it." End quote.
It is quite an opener, isn't it?
Right.
Mm.
I mean, imagine opening up this manual and you're, fully expecting to learn some profound ancient secrets, but the very first sentence just stops you dead in your tracks.
Yeah, it interrogates you right off the bat.
Exactly. It doesn't welcome you in. It asks if you're even worthy to be looking at the page at all. So welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We are thrilled to have you with us today as we explore a really fascinating set of notes.
And these notes are dense in the best way possible.
They really are. We're looking at Ben Hod's curriculum today, specifically Module 1, Unit 3, which is this incredibly profound interpretation of a 19th century text by Eliphas Levi called The Doctrine and Ritual of High Magic.
A monumental text for the occult revival, honestly.
For sure. And our mission today is to kind of figure out why true magic, at least in Levi's framework, has absolutely nothing to do with, stage illusions or parlor tricks.
Yeah. Right. No pulling rabbits out of hats here.
No, not at all. It is instead this brutal psychological and moral gatekeeper. It demands radical self-reformation.
It really is a total subversion of how we normally interact with information, because usually, you read a book and you are the active consumer, right? The book is passive.
Yeah, it just sits there.
Exactly. But Levi, he sought to bridge the chasm between ancient mysticism and modern mechanics. So to do that, he constructs his text to act as a mirror.
Reflecting you back to yourself.
Right. He establishes immediately that this isn't some theoretical exercise. It is the literal threshold to what he calls the great work.
The great work.
Yeah. He's putting a wall up, essentially saying that before you can even attempt to command the external forces of nature, you have to prove you have absolute command over the internal forces of your own soul.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because that opening interrogation leads directly to the foundational requirement for passing his gate. Right?
It does. It sets the baseline.
Right. And Levi demands total self-honesty here. He references that famous inscription on the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, which is Gnothi Satan, or know thyself.
A classic maxim.
Yeah. But when you and I hear know thyself today, it is just so easy to filter that through modern self-help.
Oh, absolutely.
We think it means taking a personality quiz on the internet or, going on a weekend wellness retreat to find our bliss or whatever.
Which is a very comfortable, very sanitized interpretation. But Levi is operating on a much more rigorous level.
He's not messing around.
No, he's not. What's fascinating here is that Levi equates this ancient command with science.
But not like modern lab science, right?
Right. He's not talking about lab coats or beakers, obviously. He's reaching back to the Latin root of the word, which is scientia.
Yeah.
And that implies a total, comprehensive, lived knowledge of reality. It's an internal auditing process. You have to know your biases, your unhealed traumas, your psychological triggers, all of it.
It's a brutal inventory.
It's an excruciatingly honest inventory of your own mechanics, your absolute baseline conditions.
I was actually reading through the notes before we started, and Ben Hod uses this brilliant analogy from his own life to explain the mechanics of this audit.
The finance one.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. He works in finance, and he compares this know thyself mandate to a financial advisor taking on a brand new client.
It's a surprisingly perfect fit.
It really is, because if you go to an advisor, they need the hard data. They need your cash flows, your hidden liabilities, your actual spending habits.
You can't hide anything from them.
Right, because if a client doesn't admit or genuinely doesn't even know that he's, say, a compulsive spender when he gets stressed out at work,
then the strategy falls apart.
Exactly. It doesn't matter what kind of brilliant, mathematically perfect tax strategy the advisor builds for him. The underlying psychological trigger is going to cause him to just blow his entire retirement.
That is the perfect way to understand the causality here. You just cannot implement complex strategies, whether they are financial or occult, in a psychological vacuum.
The foundation has to be solid.
Right. Because in Levi's universe, the medium of all magical operation is something he calls the astral light.
The astral light. Okay, how should we think about that?
Think of the astral light as a highly sensitive cosmic medium. It records absolutely everything and is directly, intimately shaped by human will.
Oh, wow. So it's incredibly responsive.
Highly responsive. So if you don't know your own internal wiring, if you are a compulsive spender of emotional energy, to use the finance metaphor, you are going to leave incredibly ugly, chaotic fingerprints all over that astral light.
Man. And if your mind is chaotic, your results are going to be chaotic.
Exactly.
Which actually reminds me of another analogy Hode brings up in the material. And since I play a little guitar on the weekends, this one really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah, the rusted strings.
Yeah. He asks you to imagine visiting a friend's house, right? And they have this guitar leaning against the living room wall, but it's mostly just there for decoration.
Right. Nobody actually plays it.
Yeah. So you pick it up and you try to play this beautiful, intricate riff. But not only is the guitar painfully out of tune, the strings are completely rusted.
Oh, that's the worst.
They feel like old fence wire just cutting into your fingers.
And the mechanics of that are exactly what Levy is warning us about here. It really doesn't matter if you have the intent and the physical skill of a master musician.
The song is still going to sound awful.
Right. If the instrument itself is corroded and out of tune, whatever you play is going to sound like garbage.
Because the medium is flawed.
Exactly. Your intent is fundamentally distorted by the physical condition of the medium. So Levy is demanding that we tune the instrument of our psyche first before we try to play any music.
Okay, wait, let me push back a little here. If the goal is absolute internal control and making sure the instrument is perfectly tuned, why is Levy so fiercely protective of this knowledge?
You mean his tone in the book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does this level of strict gatekeeping make him an elitist? Because reading his demands, it can feel incredibly exclusive. Almost like he's trying to keep people out just to feel superior.
Well, Hod actually admits in the text that Levy was a bit of an elitist in his tone. He definitely had that vibe.
He really did.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the gatekeeping isn't actually born out of arrogance. It's immensely practical. I would even argue he's acting as a protective, almost fatherly figure.
Protective. How so?
Because the light of consciousness he's talking about directing is highly, highly volatile. Going back to the finance realm, Hode points out that you wouldn't hand someone a high leverage margin account without them first understanding market volatility.
Oh, man, yeah. Margin calls are brutal.
Right. If they don't understand the brutal reality of a margin call, the leverage will just bankrupt them overnight.
So the gatekeeping is for their own good.
Yes. Know thyself is the ultimate safety manual. Levy puts the wall up to ensure the volatile light of the universe doesn't just end up burning the practitioner to the ground.
Wow. Okay, but tuning the instrument and reading the safety manual, that's really only half the battle, right?
Right, that's just the prep work.
Exactly. Once you've audited your psychological triggers, what are you actually supposed to do with that baseline? Like, what does a tuned psyche actually allow you to achieve?
That's the real question.
Because Levy gives this ultimate goal a very specific name in the text. He calls it the Sanctum Regnum.
The Sanctum Regnum, or the Regnum Dei, which translates from Latin to the Holy Kingdom, or the Kingdom of God.
Which sounds very religious.
It does, but we have to immediately strip away the Sunday school baggage associated with those phrases. Because he is definitely not talking about theology here.
No pearly gates.
Right, he isn't describing a physical domain in the clouds, and he's certainly not talking about some afterlife reward for being a good person.
So what is it in his framework?
In Levy's science, the Holy Kingdom is an internal evolutionary state of sovereign self-control.
He actually draws this huge, stark distinction between what he calls the kings and priests of science and the vulgar princes of the world.
Yes, that distinction is crucial.
And we should definitely clarify the vocabulary here for you listening, because when Levy uses the word vulgar, he doesn't mean like someone telling an off-color joke at a dinner party.
No, not vulgar as in rude. Vulgar in this context refers to the common, completely unexamined human condition.
The default state.
Exactly. The vulgar crowd is entirely enslaved by their passions, their prejudices, and their knee-jerk emotional reactions.
They're just on autopilot.
Right. If someone insults you and you immediately fly into a rage because your ego is bruised, you are being vulgar. You are being acted upon by the world rather than acting upon it.
Hod points out the irony of this in his financial planning practice. He says he sees people with tens of millions of dollars.
Oh, the vulgar princes.
Right. In the eyes of society, these people are absolute royalty. They have the yachts, they have the massive properties, the job titles.
But internally?
Internally, they're absolute slaves to their own anxiety. They panic the second the market dips. They lose sleep over their social status. They have zero rulership over their own minds.
So they aren't kings at all.
Not in Levy's framework. True power, which the Greeks called autoexousia, meaning raw, self-governing power, it doesn't require a state permit. It doesn't care about your net worth at all.
It's completely independent of external factors.
Totally. It is entirely about whether you govern your own internal weather.
And that concept of true internal sovereignty is actually what drove Ben-Hod away from his previous career.
Ministry.
Yes. The notes mention that he spent 12 years serving in Southern Baptist ministry. But in 2005, he reached this breaking point.
What happened?
He realized he could no longer practice what he preached within a system he found to be fundamentally flawed. A system that was heavily focused on external appearances rather than internal truths.
So the performative aspect got to him.
Exactly. He concluded the fault was with the system itself, so he exercised his own autoxugia, his own sovereignty, and he just walked away.
The story he shares about that time perfectly highlights the difference between real and fake power.
The one about the senior pastor.
Yeah. He talks about a former senior pastor he worked under who was just on a massive ego trip.
This story is wild.
It is. To remain in good standing as a staff member, this pastor banned everyone from taking their families out to eat at restaurants on Sundays.
Which is just so controlling.
Right. And his logic was that eating out would indirectly force a waiter or a cook to work on the Lord's Day.
Wow.
But Hood points out this wasn't even a standard church doctrine. It was literally just this pastor enforcing an arbitrary sacrifice to exert control over his staff.
That is the quintessential vulgar prince behavior Levy warns about.
Simulating power.
Exactly. That pastor was demanding external, performative sacrifices to feed his own ego. Levy, by contrast, demands what he calls internal holocausts of the ego.
Internal holocausts. That is heavy.
It is. To be a king of science, you don't restrict where people eat. You burn down your own subjective delusions.
You sacrifice your own stuff.
Right. You sacrifice your desperate need to be right, your desire for control, your reactive passions.
Yeah.
All so you can become a clear, unobstructed vessel for truth. It is entirely about proactive self-mastery.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. But also, I think, where a listener could easily misinterpret the goal here.
How so?
Well, if the objective is absolute internal control, doesn't that just lead to a complete detachment from reality?
I see what you mean.
It sounds like Levy is advocating for us to become these emotionless monks sitting on a mountain, totally disconnected from society, so nothing can ever trigger us.
Right.
Like, if we are supposed to ignore the princes of this world, do we just stop paying taxes and quit our jobs?
That is a very natural assumption to make, honestly. But it's the exact opposite of what Levy is actually teaching.
Right.
Yeah. Internal sovereignty doesn't mean retreating from the real world. It actually dictates how you handle the real world.
Okay, unpack that for me.
When Levy says the calling of magic has nothing to do with the princes of this world, he means your internal state shouldn't be dependent on external chaos.
So you're still in the world, just not of it.
Precisely. If you are drowning in debt because you couldn't control your spending impulses, or if you spend half your day furious because of some political post you read on social media.
Which happens to all of us.
Right. But when that happens, you are just a leaf blowing in the wind. Sovereignty means you still engage with taxes, jobs, and daily life, but you do so proactively.
You aren't governed by the prejudices of the world.
Exactly. You govern your response to them. You stop leaking your power through unconscious reactions.
So we've explored the goal here, this internal sovereignty where you stop reacting and start governing.
The sanctum regnum.
Right. But how do you actually execute that? Like, how do you claim this holy kingdom?
It takes work.
Yeah, and Levy doesn't leave this vague at all. He gives us a very strict, uncompromising definition of what he calls an adept.
The term adept originates from the Latin word adeptus, which literally means one who has attained.
One who has attained.
And Levy's definition here is perhaps the most critical mechanical insight in the entire text. He states that an adept is someone who succeeds by their will and through their works.
And see, we are so conditioned by pop culture to think of an adept or a magician as someone born with a special mystical gift, right?
Like a chosen one.
Exactly. A chosen one with a lightning bolt scar on their forehead.
Yeah.
But Levy is completely democratizing the concept.
He really is.
He's making it a DIY project of the soul. If you do the work, you get the results. You cannot study your way into magic. You can't just think really hard about it and make it happen.
No armchair magicians allowed.
No. It is a strict meritocracy of the spirit.
What's fascinating here is how Levy blends the ancient Neoplatonic tradition with sheer unrelenting grit.
The Neoplatonic tradition. Let's define that real quick for the listener.
Sure. For you listening, the Neoplatonic tradition is essentially this classical philosophy that everything in reality, both mind and matter, flows outward from a single, unified, divine source.
Meaning your mind and the physical world are fundamentally connected.
Exactly. Levi takes that lofty, abstract philosophy, but he insists the mechanics of it are totally unforgiving. Think of the astral light like a highly sensitive touchscreen.
Okay, I like this analogy.
If your will is fragmented, meaning you have 5 different anxieties firing at once and your attention is scattered, it's like mashing your entire hand onto the screen all at once.
The system just freezes up.
Right. It requires the precision of a single unified point of focus to actually direct the energy. The transmutation of the self requires physicalized persistence, will, and works.
Hod gives us a beautiful, incredibly relatable spectrum of what those works actually look like in daily life.
And they aren't always grand, mystical gestures.
No, he starts with something very ordinary. He compares attaining adeptship to his daughter mastering her bicycle.
Such a great visual.
You can explain the physics of riding a bike to a kid all day long. You can read them books about balance and momentum. But eventually, they have to physically lose the training wheels.
They have to feel it themselves.
Right. They have to experience the terrifying balance themselves. No one can pedal the bike for you.
He also highlights a deeply mundane, everyday test of the will that I think any parent can immediately relate to.
The Minecraft story.
Yes. He talks about having some rare free time and choosing to sit down and play the video game Minecraft with his 9-year-old daughter, Ellie.
Which, as he notes, he doesn't enjoy.
He explicitly notes in the material, quote, "Do I love my daughter? Yes. Do I love Minecraft? Hell no." End quote.
That is so relatable.
But choosing to actively engage with her, instead of retreating to his office to just read more occult books, that is an exercise of sovereign will over his own personal preference.
It's a choice.
Yes, it is a micro-sacrifice of the ego. It's a work.
And then the notes shift from those micro-sacrifices to a profoundly heavy, macro-level example of this principle in action.
Yeah, the tone shifts significantly here.
I want to give this the space it deserves, because it proves this isn't just a theory for him. Last October, Hod lost his wife.
A terrible tragedy.
It was. They had been navigating a failed marriage, and he had actually moved out just a month before she fell suddenly ill, completely losing her ability to communicate.
Just heartbreaking.
And despite their separation, they spent her final months partnering together to facilitate the end of her life. He writes that the brutal, inescapable circumstances forced him to face the shadow self he'd been suppressing for years.
That is the crucible. That is exactly where the abstract theory of magic meets the raw, agonizing reality of human existence.
It's where the rubber meets the road.
Precisely. Hod noted that his 5 years of studying Levi's occult frameworks suddenly weren't intellectual curiosities anymore. They became raw, necessary psychological survival tools.
Because he had to hold it together.
He had to keep his head above water, to remain a stable foundation for his young daughter while dealing with immense crushing trauma. He had to become a sovereign of his own grief and chaos.
He had to build that sanctum regnum.
He had to take the fragmented pieces of his life and rebuild his reality brick by brick through sheer force of will. That is not a metaphor. That is the true, lived manifestation of an adept.
It's incredibly moving. He actually wrote a song inspired by this specific unit of the curriculum, and the lyrics perfectly capture that intense ownership of one's reality in the face of chaos.
The lyrics are very powerful.
I want to share a piece of the chorus with you listening because it just hits so hard. Quote, "I take the crown, I own the flame. No chains, no shame, no borrowed name. I break the code, I face the stone. I reign alone, I reign alone. I take the crown, I choose the road. I bear the weight, I hold the load. No throne above, no world alone. I make my crown my own." End quote.
I make my crown my own. That lyric right there is the absolute essence of the meritocracy of the spirit Levi is writing about.
No one gives it to you.
Exactly. Nobody hands you the sanctum regnum on a silver platter. You don't inherit it through your bloodline, and you certainly don't buy it with wealth.
You earn it.
You have to build it through unyielding discipline, by surviving the crucible of your own life, and by fundamentally reforming your character. If you want to hold the light, you must pass the test of the works.
So what does this all mean when we put the pieces together? We've covered a massive amount of ground today, moving from ancient Greek maxims to modern finance and through profound personal grief.
We really have.
But the core journey of this deep dive is actually incredibly focused. Levy's intense psychological gatekeeping, that piercing demand to know thyself before you read another word, isn't designed to keep people out of spite.
No, not at all.
It's designed to ensure that a seeker is internally solid enough to handle the actual mechanics of reality.
He is stripping away the theatrical nonsense. He doesn't care about parlor tricks or stage magic.
He wants the real deal.
He demands radical self-honesty because the truth, as Levy warns, will absolutely crush you if your foundation is built on the shifting sands of worldly prejudices, hidden anxieties, and reactive passions.
Like trying to run advanced software on a corrupted hard drive.
Exactly. If your hard drive is corrupted, the software will just crash the entire system.
And that is the ultimate takeaway for you listening right now. Before you seek external power, before you chase the promotion, the validation of your peers, or even profound mystical truths, you have to audit your own soul.
The internal work comes first.
Always. You have to tune your own instrument. You have to claim your internal crown first through your own unified will and your own persistent works.
And as we reflect on that really demanding process, this raises an important question, one that Levy hints at, but honestly leaves unresolved for us to ponder.
Okay, lay it on us.
We discussed how Levy believes the astral light is a cosmic medium that records absolutely everything, right? And that it behaves like a touchscreen directly shaped by human will. Well, if that is mechanically true, and if, as Levy suggests, the vast majority of the world is basically sleepwalking, living as vulgar slaves to their reactive passions, their unexamined biases, and their daily panics.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
What kind of chaotic imprint is humanity's collective, unchecked anxiety leaving on the fabric of reality right now?
Wow.
If we're all walking around, mashing our hands on the screen, playing deeply out-of-tune instruments, what does the symphony of the world actually sound like to an adept who has finally learned to tune theirs?
That is a chilling, incredible thought to sit with as you go about your day. And it brings us right back to where we started, really.
Full circle.
The next time you open a book that challenges you, or the next time you face a moment in your life that demands your will, remember that it's not just a passive exchange.
No, the universe is active.
The text, the moment, the reality. It's looking right back at you, waiting to see if you have the internal sovereignty to turn the page. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. To your instruments, do the work, and we'll see you next time.
You hold the pages in your hands tonight, dust on the stone cold temple light, 2 words cut deep in my